You thought the pattern was gone. You felt different, you saw the signs, and then boom, it's back again. You feel like you're right back at square one. Let's break down why this keeps happening and how to make your self-concept shift last this time. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Lorena. I'm a somatic self-concept and identity coach, and I support women to bridge the gap between who they currently are or how they perceive themselves and who they desire to be or become, so that you can break even the most deep-rooted and persistent patterns in your life and relationship dynamics and circumstances, and so that you can step into the version of yourself and the reality that you desire and deserve. In this video, we will break down a really common experience, which is when you think you've had a breakthrough of some pattern that keeps repeating in your life, or maybe a belief that you have, or a self-concept that you've been working on changing, and you think you've cracked the code, right? But soon enough, it repeats again. Specifically, we will dive into what that experience looks like, why you experience this false sense of progress, what makes a new self-concept so hard to sustain, how you can take responsibility and ensure that you stop repeating this pattern, and what makes self-concept shifts stick long-term so that you no longer regress back into your old self. So the experience of working on your self-concept and then reverting back again can show up internally or externally. Externally means it can show up in repetitive patterns in your external reality. So for example, maybe you think you now feel worthy of the love that you want, but you still keep calling in emotionally unavailable partners. I just made a video on that specific pattern and dynamic a couple weeks ago, so if you haven't seen that yet, I'm gonna link it above my head and also down below in the description box. It can also show up as you feeling more confident and feeling more secure, but then something happens. Or one day you just wake up and you no longer see yourself as capable of more, despite wanting to or having a vision for it. It can also show up as you trying to adopt a new belief system, a new mindset, maybe embody a new state of being, but it doesn't stick. And maybe there's a lot that you've been doing, right? Maybe you've been diligent with your affirmations, or you've been in therapy for quite a few years. Or maybe you just feel a bit better in yourself than you used to. So you think you've cracked the code, but then something happens that just triggers you right back to where you once were. Or at least that's what it feels like. Now, we do revisit the same patterns, the same triggers, the same wounds from new states of consciousness. And we do that continuously throughout our lives. So it's not abnormal for you to have old patterns re-arise, but when you have integrated something successfully, it will be completely different. You will have a different experience of it, and it won't feel like you're completely reverting back to where you once were. That is therefore not what I'm talking about today. I am going to talk about the false sense of progress that we can sometimes experience, and why it's so hard to sustain self-concept shifts and how you can make that happen. So I wanted to just make a little side note of that, because it doesn't mean that just because you get triggered, you are back to where you started. In fact, that is quite a normal experience. But the flavor of that will be different depending on how much integration has happened in your system, what your self-concept now is, how much you have truly shifted. There is the experience of you thinking that you have shifted, that you have truly evolved into a new self-concept, but you haven't really to the extent that you think. And this is what I like to call a false sense of progress. Now, the consequence of this false sense of progress can feel quite big, because when you are in a loop of false sense of progress, what then happens after that is collapse. So you collapse, you feel like you're reverting back into your old self. When that happens, the next part of that process, that, let's say, circle, is usually feeling failure, feeling like you just cannot get it right. Maybe even that there's something wrong with you, or that you'll never get it. This can create a shame spiral. So You think you've shifted, but it hasn't happened at the depth that you think. Something happens, you get triggered, you revert back, you get a collapse, a sense of failure, and then that triggers shame, unworthiness, self-doubt, and then it starts all over again. Frustrating cycle to be in. And it happens for a few different reasons, which I want to break down for you. Number one, you think that a breakthrough is a permanent shift. Having a realization doesn't always mean that something actually shifts in your self-concept. But because having a light bulb moment can temporarily feel that way, it can create that illusion and lead to the cycle of false sense of progress, collapse, shame spiral. Number two, you're mistaking feeling different one day for being someone new or living from a new embodiment, a new state of being, a new identity. It's important to remember that your state of being changes all the time. It is meant to fluctuate, especially if you're a woman with a menstrual cycle. You're not going to feel the same day in, day out. That is normal, and that is not the goal. And sometimes when you are high vibe and you feel really good, you can mistake that for an identity shift. And then when you have a normal fluctuation in your mood, it feels like you've regressed back. So you've never actually had a shift in your core identity in the first place. You were just in a good mood one day. Because what constitutes a long-term shift is not about your state of being. It's maybe about your habitual state of being, what you reside in, what you live from the most, but it is more so about your deeper identity and not just having a good day. Number three, your nervous system can mimic a shift in peak states. So you're in a good mood, things are going well, your nervous system is relaxed, but the real test happens when your system gets stressed. Do you then revert back, or do you stay aligned with the self-concept that you think you've stepped into? Now, staying aligned doesn't mean perfection. It also doesn't mean bypassing what you're feeling or bypassing what your truth is. It doesn't mean lying to yourself, but truly feeling and becoming it. And number four, you're relying on external signs. So maybe things are going better in your life, in your reality. Let's say you've had the pattern of always calling in emotionally unavailable people, which I gave as an example earlier on. And now you meet someone and they seem very available and things are going well and it's flowing and you're like, yes, I've broken the pattern. It's gone. Like things are going really well. But then it shifts, right? Maybe that person stops showing up in that way, or you do break up. So your circumstances change. And when circumstances that are misaligned from what you want to experience show up, you can't hold the embodiment. Your self-identity, your self-concept just reverts back to what it was because of that shift in your external reality. So you are actually relying on something outside of yourself to make you feel a certain way. If you can't hold the embodiment in experiences like this, it just means that you are still looking outside of yourself for proof of who you are, rather than you deciding who you are and allowing the circumstances around you to match up with who you decide you are. Let me know which of these four you find yourself falling into the most. Drop it in the comments. I would love to hear what resonates with you. Wherever you are, I can promise you, you're definitely not alone. Sometimes sharing about it can make us feel less alone and more supported in what we're going through. But all of these examples I've given just speak to a temporary shift instead of what I like to call a rebirth. Because a true shift in your self-concept is actually a rebirth. It involves a death of who you once were or who you thought you were, and stepping into who you were always meant to be. This is the only way to truly embody a new self-concept, when you go through a death and rebirth cycle. The death of your old self and the birth of a new version of yourself. When you're still in two states at the same time, you're still holding on to what once was, you create an inner conflict and a temporary illusion that will never last, which then gets you into the shame spiral. And part of why this happens is because most women try to change their experience, their beliefs, their self-concept through thought alone. But beliefs don't shift through thought, by the way. They shift through experience. I'll go a lot deeper into that in next week's video. So if you want to learn more about that, then make sure you're subscribed to my channel, and ideally you have notifications switched on as well so that you will be notified when that video goes live. But let's dive into why a new identity is so hard to sustain. because it is hard. It is not your fault if you're finding it hard. Everyone finds it hard. But there are 3 reasons why you are finding it hard to sustain. Number 1, your current identity, your current self-concept has been programmed into you throughout your entire life. So the identity you're living from, and likely the one you're wanting to move on from, the patterns you're wanting to move on from, that's a bunch of stuff from your past that you carry with you. And what you've learned your whole life, even if unintentionally, you didn't choose this, right? Not actively, it's difficult to release what's familiar to you. And yet here you are trying to create something completely new, a completely new way of living and being. Now, it makes sense that the old is going to try and persist. It's going to want to make its way back through. Later, we're going to dive into what it takes to make it click and to make it last, no matter how persistent your past wants to be. But first, let's move on to reason number 2. Now, the beliefs that you have about yourself are largely unconscious. The identity that you operate and live from is largely unconscious. That means that it is deep within your psyche. You can imagine this like you have a bunch of weeds in your garden and you're trying to get rid of them, but you don't get the root out, you just cut them off. Now, it's all going to grow back. Unless you dig it all out and pull it out at the root, it's going to come back and you might not even know it's there. That's kind of how you can imagine your subconscious to work. If you want to learn more about how the subconscious mind works and what it truly takes to reprogram it, and I'm not talking doing cute techniques and doing a hypnosis here and there, all great things, but there's a lot more that goes into the vastness of the subconscious, then I have a free masterclass for you. I have linked it below in the description. You just enter your details and then it'll be sent straight to your inbox to watch. Okay, so reason number 3. Your body and your nervous system remembers the old. It remembers your old identity, it remembers your old beliefs, it remembers your old emotions and triggers, it remembers the circumstances that trigger the emotions to come through in the first place. And so therefore, your body, your nervous system is pretty stubborn to change. Now, when I talk about changing your habitual state of being, this is really about a change at the depth of your nervous system. So I like to call this a rewiring of your nervous system. So it's not just regulating your nervous system. It's not just regulating yourself from a fight or flight or any activated state and making yourself feel calmer in the moment. It's a rewiring of what is most common, most persistent, most natural to you. And that is a large portion of what my clients experience in my program, Recreate Yourself. And it's why the changes in their self-concept that they experience are so profound and so long-lasting because it integrates in their being. It becomes something that clicks, not just conceptually, but in their body and in their felt experience. So you can see why it's hard. Those are pretty significant reasons for it to be hard. None of this is your fault, as you can hopefully see, but now it's your responsibility. When you understand what's actually happening here, you have already taken the first step to shift it for good this time. But taking responsibility also means recognizing how you are keeping yourself in a pattern that you don't actually want to be in. Even when you say you don't want to be in it, a part of you is choosing it. So we need to take responsibility for that. And I want to give you a few ways how you could potentially be sabotaging yourself and keeping yourself in that pattern. And I would love to know if any of these hit for you, if you can see yourself in any of these where you're like, damn, I think I'm doing this. One of the things that you may be doing is you might be expecting fast results. And when it takes longer or it feels like it's slow to unfold, you're disappointed with yourself. And then you reaffirm the belief that there is something wrong with you. Remember the false progress shame spiral thing that I told you about? Another way you might be unintentionally sabotaging your progress is by faking confidence instead of truly feeling it. In other words, you're faking it till you make it. If you are still feeling what you want to feel from an old state of being and identity, it's gonna be fake. It's not gonna be true, and therefore it's not gonna last. Another very common way that I see women do where they keep themselves in the same pattern, even though they are trying to move on from it, is when they have all this self-awareness, but they are really just analyzing their patterns and their beliefs and their trauma over and over again, instead of actually changing it. So you can almost get stuck in this trap of continually healing again and again and again. It becomes a never-ending journey. Healing is, in a way, a never-ending journey, but you don't want to get stuck in this healing trap where you're just looking for flaws in yourself, for things to fix. That's not healing. That's the opposite of healing. And I hear this so often from women, especially who are in therapy their whole lives, but the same patterns are still repeating in their external circumstances, in their relationships, even in the way they feel. If you've been following me for a while, you might have heard me talk about this because, listen, I think therapy is awesome, especially as a starting point. And of course, it has its place in like actual mental illnesses, mental health issues. I would never say that coaching is the right way to treat depression, for example. So it definitely has its place, but traditional talk therapy just has a limit where at some point you just start going in circles and you revisit the same stuff again and again and you just don't make the progress. And it can be very frustrating because you feel like every week you're talking to your therapist and it more feels like you get to talk through your issues, but nothing actually really changes. And so that can come with intellectualizing your patterns and your beliefs and your wounds. Another way you might be sabotaging yourself is when you see it as a failure when your old self reappears. As I said, the old you is gonna wanna make their way back through. It's gonna be persistent. So the real skill lies in knowing how to navigate this. It's a real art. It's not easy to learn, but when you know exactly how to navigate this powerfully so that you almost get to alchemize it into what serves you, then it's actually a real gift when your old self reappears because it can allow you to heal and integrate it fully, provided you know how to do this. So those are the ways in which you might be sabotaging yourself. Let me know which one of those resonates the most with you, or maybe it's all of them. Now, what makes self-concept shifts actually stick a long term? In order to really make it click into place so that you don't revert back to your old habits, your old patterns, your old self, and your old reality, and you don't need to fear that that's going to happen, you need integration of every part of you, your subconscious, your nervous system, your psyche, your emotions. It's all in agreement with this new version of you that you are stepping into. Integration is essentially the basis for embodiment. What many women perceive as embodiment is just practicing a feeling over and over, hoping that it will click into place. But just practicing a feeling, a state, a belief without there being a structural basis in your nervous system, in your habitual state already, that just leads to bypassing. Even if you don't want to do that. When the foundation isn't right, you just keep going back and forth. Imagine you're building a house and you forgot to sort out the foundation. It's gonna collapse at some point. Integration is you building that foundation. And building a foundation, integration, takes time. It takes the right approach, the right process, the right help, and it takes personalization. Because depending on where you build the house, the foundation needs to look different. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. But then the second thing you need will be practice and consistency. Now, I did say integration first because I wanted to emphasize that practice alone isn't enough, but that doesn't mean that it's not important at all. In fact, once that foundation is solid, then we still need to practice. Now, the reason I'm often so hesitant with speaking about this practice piece is because the majority of the women that come to work with me in Recreate Yourself, the majority of the women I speak to, they think they've got the foundation because they've done all this work, right? They have tried to change their self-concept. They are incredibly self-aware. They have done the therapy. They've probably hired multiple coaches and done courses and this and that. So they think they've got the foundation, but there's always some gaps. There's always some holes in the foundation that we need to close in the process of working together. So don't fool yourself into thinking, oh, I've got the foundation down, now I just need to practice. Maybe, I don't know, but likely not. And we can get quite impatient with this anyway, because I always say to my clients, who obviously come to work with me because they want to change their self-concept, right? So they're like, cool, let's do some self-concept work. Let's do some embodiment work. I want to meet this new version of myself. But that part of the process is honestly the very last step. But once we're there, that's when it gets really fun. That's when you get to practice. And being consistent with that practice is super important because it's going to feel unfamiliar, even when you've got the foundation. You're still building something new. Your identity is going to feel foreign. It's like when you're clearing out, we've got so many analogies in this video, but bear with me. It's like when you're clearing out your wardrobe and you buy a completely new one, completely new style. Don't know if any of you ever have this pull towards changing your entire fashion sense. I get this every few years. But then when you try on all these new clothes and you start wearing them, it's going to feel weird at first. It's probably not going to feel like you at all. But over time, when you wear it every day, it's just going to be your new normal. Something that you feel now suits you, something that you identify with. And finally, you need accountability and ideally professional support. Best case scenario, you have someone who can mirror things back to you, who can see things that you probably can't see on your own, who can help guide you through the process of evolving your self-concept. That is the nature of the subconscious, and it's the nature of the ego. Your old identity is going to come back in. Your subconscious is going to try to keep the root intact. Your nervous system is going to go back into states that feel familiar. And it's very hard to notice that happening or to stay conscious of not reverting back when you are doing this alone or even just with a friend. So accountability is super important, and it's also really great when it comes to community. Women who have either done it before and who are, let's say, ahead of you, or women who are on this path at the same time as you, so that you feel less alone in it. That is so powerful. You can support each other. You have more understanding for different parts of the process. That is something that my clients love about Recreate Yourself, because we don't just shift your self-concept, we do it together in community. Real identity shifts really take time. They take consistency. They need the right foundation. When you stop chasing peak states and you start integrating your new self-concept from the inside out, you stop reverting back and you start evolving for good. Let me know what you're most familiar with, the shame spiral, the fake confidence, or the therapy trap, and I will see you in next week's video.